I want to call a special budget council meeting of March 22nd, 2022 to order with adoption of the agenda. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councillor Charlotte, second by Councillor Brooksell. All in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to item number 4A, water, sewage, and garbage administration costs. So, Ms. McKay, do you want to speak to that at all before we put the motion on the table?
I can. Just one moment. I'm just going to find. I just realized I don't have the agenda in front of me, so I'm looking at the draft long-term financial plan. Is that what you have?
No, we have that the administrative oversight and overhead for water, sewer, and garbage be allocated as per actual cost for the 2022 financial plan and all subsequent.
Oh, my apologies. Yes, you can go ahead with those. My apologies.
Okay, so I actually just put that motion on the table. Does someone want to second it? Councillor Brooksville. Any discussion on that motion? Councillor Charlotte.
I've been thinking about this one a lot, and with the heavy spending that we're looking to do, I'm grateful that we're cleaning up how our costs are allocated between property taxes and utility fees. I'm cautious about how we communicate about this.
Right.
And how we use language around the shifting of the fees that we're doing, and then the legitimate increases that we need to talk about as a community. I'm wondering, and I would love any guidance or insight on this, if as we go through the long-term financial plan, I'm feeling more and more strongly about having guidance around language and how we talk about the various types of fees so that we can have consistency. I appreciate how consistent communication can really help with getting the message across. And it's those casual conversations where we use other words casually without thinking about it that builds on that confusion,
right,
if you will. And so as we go through this, I think this is an important step for future budgets as well, that we're talking about the utilities separate from the property taxes. But I think that it's really important that as we make this transition, if there's room to get some support on that language and communication piece.
Okay, so when we talk about the language more in lay terms, so it's understandable by the entire community, and then talking about how we communicate that out so people can go to one place and have a spot where they can actually see how these things work.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about that at the last meeting, and you kind of indicated that would be a good way out. Any comments, Ms. McCabe, on how we communicate in a way that's consistent and understandable by community?
Through your worship, yeah, I agree. I think that we need to be much more consistent and not intermingle the different terms for the same thing, for sure. And so how that gets done, I'll be definitely working with the communications coordinator so that we can make sure that that gets done.
Thank you. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business 5A. Someone want to put that on the table for discussion, please? Councillor Brooksville.
Does the cost of the 4th Street traffic calming project, $1 million, be funded from the Community Works gas tax reserve?
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Charlotte. Discussion on the motion. And Councillor Charlotte.
First, just a clarifying question. The gas tax funds. I remember reading some changes to the gas tax and community. I think they changed the name of the fund.
Yeah.
Or there have been. So talking about consistent language, right? Like
yes.
These. So I think now. Community infrastructure funding or something is what it's called officially.
Sorry, through your worship. So the challenge we're having is that we've got the reserve fund named that, and so I need to update the bylaw to reflect the new language that's being used, because you're right. Traditionally, it was called the Community Works gas tax, and we were given that money every year, and then we recognize it as a revenue, and then we set it aside in a reserve for when we need to use it. And so that's what the name of the reserve is, but you're right, it is, they have changed, the federal government has changed the name of it.
Okay. And if I can continue, then Your Worship.
Yes.
I've been thinking about these various projects and looking at what are the projects that I believe our council term should cover and invest in and provide resourcing for. And what projects or what conversations are maybe more suitable for an election topic. Now, I'm super careful and mindful of this. This is a new thing for me, at least going into an election season, not knowing if I'll win or not. It's not about the political win on this.
Right.
But there's some big conversations we're having in here, and we are talking about going back to long-term borrowing and debt to service some of these needs. And I think that's appropriate. But I also think that it's really important that we get the community's buy-in and commitment to these conversations. And I think that there might be room to have a healthy conversation this fall about some of these big investments that we need to do. For the 4th Street Calming Project, some of the conversations I've been hearing and my own experience with that area of our community, it's feeling a lot of pressure from the development and growth that we're going through right now. And I do think that it's an important project to carry on with. So I am supportive of using these funds. I'm curious, I gotta dig in a bit better about what the balance is and what's left in those funds, because we lean on them for quite a few different projects. So curious and interested to hear from the rest of council to see how we feel about funding which from where.
Mr. Black, if I can ask a question regarding 4th Street. So we talk about this project and the funding coming from the gas tax reserve. Is this something that should be dealt with this year, or can it be put off a year, or what's going to be the best? And I'm not trying to negate the fact that it's before us now and we need to deal with it in some capacity, but with the building that may be going on 4th Street with the housing project, and is this an ideal time to do this traffic calming, or are we better to wait till after that project's done? Or we have the funds now in the gas tax that we wouldn't use for anything else? This is the best time for it. So any input?
Thank you, Your Worship. In my opinion, as council is aware, there are many transportation-related initiatives underway, including the Transportation Master Plan. And part of that will also include some components of what some typical traffic calming opportunities and designs are for our future. We anticipate adopting that this summer. Will it be different than what we are anticipating for 4th Street currently? No, it will be very similar to what we have now. In light of the fact that the BC Housing Project on 4th Street is moving forward, and we have requested that the developer, as part of their project, contribute to a traffic calming effort on 4th Street, it would be totally appropriate to defer this project for 1 year. It will also allow us to understand, as council may recall, the temporary traffic calming was installed to mainly help pedestrians cross 4th Street. And so it did not account for how to move cyclists in these through these traffic calmed areas. And so therefore, we could very well have another look at this through the summer in order to ensure that we accommodate all forms of users beyond the single occupant vehicle or the car. And so if council so desires to defer, staff would not have a problem with that at all. And it in fact might provide some more tools and recommendations for the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Piquet, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, this project is budgeted in 2023, not 2022. So we have pushed it out 1 year to 2023, but we need a funding source for it because it can't be funded from the Transportation Reserve Fund. There's not enough in there to fund this project.
So with the motion that's on the table today, if we approve this, it's still not going to be done till 2023. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Worship.
We're okay, good. All right. So that answers my question. Councillor,
Just on the source of the gas tax, is that from the gas fuel pumps. Is that right?
Yeah, it's federal.
So it's a percentage of the price.
No.
No, it's a straight fee, is it not, Ms. McKay?
I actually don't know how the federal government determines it. My understanding is it is based on the the taxes that are collected on fuel. How they actually determine how much we get, I'm not sure.
So just because the tax price is up now, or the price is up now, that we're not gonna get more money?
I can't predict that. I haven't noticed it happening in the past, but having said that, twice now they have given us bump ups in 2 different years where they gave us extra money, so they may or may not do that.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to Mr. Matusi, then come back to you, Councilor.
Yeah, there won't be a correlation directly there, mostly because the federal government collects the tax and distributes to the province, but each province distributes it differently. And unfortunately, BC has a long convoluted way. It's a bit like getting shipment off a boat in Naples, like everybody takes a bite before it comes to the local government. In Alberta, they do it per capita.
Yeah.
They just figure out the population and say, here's your percentage of money. With BC, the money first goes to the province then takes a percentage for admin, gives it to UBCM, UBCM sets up the process on how it's going to be adjudicated. And so BC, it gets a little more complicated, so that if there was a direct relationship, it gets watered down in the BC context.
But in general, the portion will increase in the future. Because at the federal level, it's a windfall with this pricing right now. They've got their budget that they've overspent on a number of things. Childcare, for instance, the childcare program is fully funded by the increase in gas taxes that they collected federally. And I think that translates down the line. So eventually we may get some. So the price that we have, the money we have, cross fingers. But hopefully we'll get an increased portion of that tax revenue.
Councilor Palmer, then Councilor Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So I think this is an appropriate allocation for that project. I think the question that we were grappling with was the timing. So I'd like to put an amending motion adding the words in the 2023 fiscal year on that motion, so it's clear that it's when this is that it's not being funded this
Is that
year.
okay with the mover and seconder? Who was it?
You were the mover, I was the second.
Okay, you're okay with it? I'm okay with it, yep.
Okay, that's good.
That's good.
And just a question. Can you expand on what the calming measures might be? I mean, I know we've narrowed them temporarily at this point, narrowed the streets or at the intersection. But what is $1 million going to buy?
Okay, Mr. Black.
Thank you, or through your worship, to Councillor Elliott. They will be very similar to what is out there now, except they will be permanent, i.e. Curb gutter, planters, fully able to drain and will be able to manage it properly in the snow. The bollards won't get knocked over. And so there will be a permanent structure that would be in place in the streets.
Has there been any feedback from the plow guys? Because I know the current issues are flexible and they bend, so they'll take a detouring traveler. But I think if you put permanent, then it becomes, I don't know if it creates a problem.
Through your worship, these have been applied in many locations throughout the world, and so it is a learning process for both staff and the traveling public, especially the people that aren't used to it or here on a regular basis. Again, our guys seem to have figured it out most of the time. I do know that we did have a few occurrences where a blade would just peel those things right off, and we immediately replaced them as quickly as we could so that we would not lose what I would call training of the public, so that we wanted to get them back there as quickly as possible so that everybody would not forget that they're there and you still can't pass at those intersections. Overall, I'm very pleased with the results, except for the few complaints that we have received regarding cyclists, and we'll make every effort this summer to accommodate, as I indicated earlier, both or all modes of non-motorized vehicles out there to ensure that we've got a safe street and it's safe for people to cross too.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Councilor Palmer.
So just on the issue here, so it's about the funding of this and just a couple comments, and I think Mr. Black has alluded to them. Really, we need to have a deeper understanding what this project really looks like, and I think that's going to be forthcoming. There's the transportation master plan. The other issue that's outstanding on the project itself is the housing Downey Street housing project and how that's affecting traffic patterns. So as far as the project itself goes, I need more clarity. However, as far as the funding for 2023, this makes sense. So that's
Okay. Yeah, appreciate that comment. Any other comments? I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 252. Someone want to put that on the table for us? Councilor Ryan.
That the cost of the school road safety improvements project, $2 million, be funded with long-term debt.
Seconder for the motion, Councilor Shalat. Discussion on the motion. Any comments from council? Any comment, Mr. Black, on this school road safety improvement?
Through your worship, thank you. I'm very pleased to bring this forward. We're a growing community, and the schools have been here for many, many, many years. And I'm very pleased to bring this project forward to enhance the safety and allow students to get to their school safely on sidewalks, which in my opinion needed to be done some time ago. So I think this is very valuable to the community, and especially in the area of Arrow Heights, where the Mackenzie Village developer is going to be bringing a sidewalk all the way down from the new roundabout to Park. And we will finally have connectivity all the way from Hay to Arrow Heights School on Nickel. And that's going to be a huge benefit to the community, and same with the Colbeck Pearson area on Columbia Heights schools.
Great. All right. Councilor Shalat and Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is another one where it is a important project that our community has been talking about for a long time. As much as I would love to not have to fund through debt, I do think this is a valid use of long-term debt for a finite, relatively, hopefully clean project.
Right.
That won't bridge out in scope into our basic maintenance that we should be funding out of reserves and taxation as part of our operating budget. I was looking through our long-term, like the long-term debt servicing, and just seeing, it's interesting to have the conversation about what do we fund through reserves and what do we fund through debt and what it costs us, to see that the debt costs go up and then come back down, that this isn't an indefinite, this is something more finite. I find that really important. Again, when I first ran for council, the previous council had run back in, when you first got onto council, there was a lot of conversation around trying to get away from debt.
Yes. So
being mindful of that when we choose to take on debt, that there is some rationale and ideas behind it. And like Mr. Black said, this is something that's important for the kids, especially with the growing community and so many young families in our town, that we need to get this rolling. So grateful to see it.
Good. All right, Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. A couple questions to Mr. Black. So there's two projects then. This is specifically for two projects. So that's Columbia Park and Arrow Heights schools. Is the design for this done? Like, do we have a solid estimate on the projects so that for the basis of this borrowing?
Mr. Black.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, we had a meeting this morning with the design team, and we have Class C estimates at this point in time, and I've directed the consultants to provide Class B estimates, which are within 10 to 15% of where we think they should be. Obviously, estimates are estimates. However, we are relatively certain that we can get this project done with the budget that has been assigned. And if we need to, we are looking for opportunities to reduce scope in order to achieve the goal of this, which is school safety. And so if we need to cut back on some sidewalk on opposite sides of the street or something of that nature, we will certainly look at that. But before we begin this project, council will certainly be involved in the award of the contract, as it is a big contract. And so at that point in time, we can provide exactly what the scope of services is and what the city will be achieving with this project. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor.
Partially. When do we anticipate the work to be done?
We anticipate starting the work at the end of the school season and be done before Labor Day.
Okay, interesting. Class C estimates. So those estimates, has council seen those, that breakdown or not? Is that?
They have not. Council's only given us direction to proceed with design at this point, and prior to us going out, if the engineer's estimate is above what our funding level is, then we will reduce the scope. And if we cannot reduce the scope, we'll return to council with asking for direction.
Mm-hmm. And then little detail question, I guess, but the Class C estimate, is that accounting for anticipated increases of asphalt? Or is asphalt a fairly significant portion of this, or?
It is a portion. As my understanding today in talking, we're getting our road paving projects ready to tender also. And so in talking with the local asphalt company, we've understand that the prices are up about 10 to 15% at this time. And so it's incumbent upon, or at least I'm encouraging staff to get our tenders out as fast as possible before any further escalation of prices occur. And so that's a big goal for us, is to get these things out sooner than later, so we get the best prices and get the work done before the seasons change.
Okay, Councillor.
Just, council hasn't seen any proposal, but I'm wondering how much input has the school board had in these designs? They're the ones that are dealing with it day to day. I'm just wondering, have they been included in the consultation process?
Absolutely. Through your worship, to Councillor Elliott, absolutely. We've met with principals at both schools, the school district, and are engaged with them on a consistent basis as we develop the plans. And so my understanding is that they're very pleased at where we are right now, and also looking forward to seeing these improvements in place.
Councillor.
You know, in general, I'm in favor of reducing traffic, principally get less cars off the road and encourage more bike and alternative transportation modes that are less impactful. Mm-hmm. Is that built into the design for the city, or what you expect? Because, you know, part of the problem now with school children and the traffic congestion around the schoolyard is that parents are driving and picking up their kids more than, well, in my era, when we had to beg for a ride home, you know. But that's the nature of the schools right now. So, you know, the schoolyard is congested by parking up front. And if the design and the school is in agreement with reducing traffic, is that part of your plan?
Through your worship, to Councillor Elliott, the big picture, yes. This project specifically is to make sure that the children have a safe place to get out of cars, walk to crosswalks, get to the school on a sidewalk, and be safe during the bus pickups. The second component of that is to ensure that the parents also know where they can park and what is allowed around there. And right now it is a free-for-all. And so we're looking at opportunities here to also help the RCMP do their jobs in the wintertime when it is congested and snowy out there. The second component of your question regarding the connectivity of these schools to sidewalks is going to be a part of the transportation master plan, where we already acknowledge that from some of the senior living facilities, we do not have sidewalks that connect to other sidewalks. So it becomes very difficult for people to even consider getting out of their car. If you recall, we also, working with the developer at Newlands, the McKinnons, extended the sidewalk in front of the hospital down to that senior facility. The work at Columbia Park will go down to Perks and Colbeck intersection. The next step is to take that piece of sidewalk to Victoria. So we need to develop a real sidewalk network that we can then fund for the long term to ensure that we have the connectivity so that as you walk to school and yeah, when I went to school, we had to walk uphill both ways. And so I'm hopeful that with the transportation master plan that we'll be able to really look at the big picture of the city and then in the long term be able to fund piece by piece by piece to make the city walkable on sidewalks.
Councilor Palmer and then Councilor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz, through the director. Is the project specifically being informed by the master transportation plan? And the kind of the question there is, it seems like we're making a decision without the master transportation plan being done. And so, but you've done a lot of the work. So can you give me a perspective as to how it's informing, or if you can tell me it's not informing it, that's fine too.
Your worship, to Councillor Palmer. It is a little bit of a chicken and an egg situation. I am very, very comfortable that the designs are going to accommodate the long term and will not need to be immediately taken out or changed in order to keep traffic speeds down. We're looking at the bulb outs for the crosswalks, everything that a typical traffic calmed school area would have in it. And so is it perfect? Is it aligned 100% with the master plan? No, but the master plan will mimic the findings of this of these designs.
The second question, in the budget discussion we had, we talked about water and sewer. I know in Columbia Park, the crews were out there doing some camera work. So is this tied to water, the utility, underground utilities at the same time, or is that independent?
What we did to ensure that we don't have to tear up the roads, and my apologies through your worship, we did send the camera crew out and had a look at the sewer there, and it is old clay tile pipe, and so it does need to be replaced. There's about a 300 100-meter belly in that sewer, so we've got the pipe is basically full of water all the time and it's not flowing properly. So we'll take money from our sanitary sewer budget to make those improvements prior to the street improvements occurring on the for the school project.
Good.
So, so just for clarity, that clay pipe, is that in the Arrow Heights or in the
Columbia Park?
Interesting. That's clay.
It is.
Then you made reference to the sidewalk network, and also used words like typical traffic calming. And I really see this need to change on how we look at the movement of people. I think it's further to Councillor Elliott about cars, how we have that, but these alternate transportation routes so that there's distinct and separate, ideally from roads. And I really hope we're not losing an opportunity in that sense of having great, not good, but great connectivity throughout the city that's separating pedestrians and other modes of traffic from cars, and that allows cars to continue at reasonable speeds without having signs and enforcement. So that's a concern to me. But I'll, maybe just make a comment regarding sidewalk versus for both Arrow Heights and for Columbia Park, as opposed to alternate transportation or multimode transportation.
You're asking a question, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, if you could just clarify what's in, like, we haven't seen any plans or sense on that.
Mr. Black, comment?
Your worship, to Councillor Palmer, I would, if it's council's direction, I would be pleased to come forward with the report. And I know it was last 2020 budget when we made a presentation at the Coast Hotel to council with senior staff, where this project was brought forward, and we did complete a excuse me, basically a school safety audit. And I don't know that council has been privy to seeing that report. I believe so, but I would be certainly glad to come back to council and provide that to council if you so desire. The multi-use path concept is something that we're pushing very hard also with grants to build a separated multi-use path from McKenna to Nickel on Airport, and then also from Nickel from Airport up to the resort. And so those are two pieces of that separated path concept that we are pushing forward currently, and will be under construction this summer for those two pieces. So we will be able to connect basically downtown on a sidewalk, or city center on a sidewalk, converting to a multi-use path, and being able to get to the resort off road. And so the pieces are coming together, and we'll continue to build those pieces, and the master plan will help inform the future segments that become a priority for the community.
Councillor Schultz.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'm interested to see how that comes out, especially with the different ways to measure costs, because I think that the lifetime cost of a multi-use path versus a sidewalk, I imagine that sidewalks are typically beside the roads because it's cheaper to maintain them, but it's not as functional for getting around in multi-modes. So understanding what those different costs are and how do we prioritize in our community so we can start budgeting from them, I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. One piece I wanted to bring up further to what Councillor Elliott was talking about earlier was we were also talking about this project at the Environmental Advisory Committee table when we were talking about idling, because one of the biggest issues with idling is around school sites.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces that came out of that conversation around the table that I thought was really interesting was that, and I'm grateful to hear that the RCMP are involved in this conversation because enforcement becomes part of it, is that if they're idling, they're not parked. And there's no parking allowed. So they will idle so they can't get dinged for parking necessarily. So having these conversations around all the different values and the different reasons why we want to do something, starting with focusing on the safety, but then also making it more, it sounds like the RCMP enforcement is part of that conversation to make it just smoother and makes more sense. So then as we educate the parents on where they can and cannot park and where that shift of mode is supposed to happen, then I would hope that we would see those other implications as well, like reduced idling in the situation. But I think we had sent that back to staff through the Environmental Advisory Committee. I just wanted to share with council as well.
Great, all right, thank you. Any further comment on the cost of the school safety improvement? Seeing none? Oh, Councillor Ryan.
Why is the debt so expensive?
Mr. Black, any comment on cost?
I'm sorry, Councillor Ryan, would you please repeat that?
Yeah, like the interest just seemed like it's a really high interest rate on that long-term debt, and I was just wondering why.
I will defer to the Finance Director, Director McCabe.
That's your worship. It's interest in principal.
Oh, I see. So it's not 8.7% interest.
No.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Good enough. Any further comment? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Palmer is opposed. Balance of council is in favor. This motion is passed. Moving on to item number 3. Someone want to put that on the table for me? Councillor Palmer?
That the annual increase in the contribution to the Transportation Infrastructure Reserve by an amount equal to 2% of taxation be extended an additional 5 years and the financial plan be approved.
All right,
Actually, I'm just gonna tweak that wording a little bit. That the annual increase in the contribution to the transportation infrastructure reserve by an amount equal to 2% of taxation be included in the 5-year financial plan.
okay. Second for that motion. Councillor Shalat, discussion on the motion and the reason for changing the words, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, so the reason for changing the word, first of all, being approved, that's what we're doing by making the motion. And then it's just clear that it's in the financial plan, so it is subject to our budget process each year. I also would like to speak to it, and it's related to the previous motion. I was a bit conflicted because, I'm strongly in favor of doing much more with the safety of roads and sidewalks around the school. Very hesitant on how we were funding, so that was that motion. So in case there was any question as to why I was opposed to it. And basically I was getting conflicted. If I approved that, I could be in favor of this other one. So, and so this is, even though it's a bit of a number pulled out of the air, I think we were recognizing that it's kind of a minimum that's needed. But it's got to be in balance to our entire budget as to how we're looking at our overall taxation. So I see this as a necessary step, but there's a bigger discussion around the budget later on.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, Councillor Elliott?
So my problem with this is that we're voting to approve this when we're taking it out of context with the rest of the budget, similar to what, so I don't know if we can do that, right? We haven't decided on the budget first. I guess you don't set in stone one element when you have a big picture to evaluate. And we're approving an increase in the transportation by 2%, but if it adds on to an 8 or significant tax bill, where do you trade? So my take is we just need to lay them all out and say, what can we do? And that's why I have trouble with this particular motion.
Great. Any comment, Ms. McCabe?
Through your worship, so there's already a council resolution was made in 2020 to do this 2% of taxation charge to go towards the transportation infrastructure for 5 years. And so this is the 3rd year of that. And that was presented to council in the previous budget meetings that we've had, and it is incorporated into the budget for this year. This is actually extending it out an additional 5 years beyond the first 5 to make sure that we can adequately fund all of the road rehabilitation works that need to be done, especially given the increases in costs that we're seeing. And so that's what this is about.
Okay. Follow-up?
So we're not adding 2% to the 2% we've already agreed on?
No.
Okay. And again, as you're extending out 5 years, I'm saying the world's changed. And we've already had trouble predicting the future 2 years out. So now we're going 5 because of I just think, and we still haven't got our master transportation plan yet. So those things have to be put before us first, and then we can decide once we have the big picture laid out. That's my take.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. So Councillor Elliott, you definitely have some valid points there. And ultimately, when we get to the finalizing the budget, we could change our mind on this, quite frankly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I don't disagree with you. I mean, I could certainly say slightly tongue-in-cheek that this is where our 2%, and that's what our increase is going to be for this year. That's it. So staff figure out the other part of getting reductions, essentially. So because we got that big dialogue about taxation, and so just to be making a whole bunch of independent decisions, but we could change our mind on this. So I expect that in, and then just for clarity, the motion that's on the table is in the 5-year financial plan, so it's 2% for each of those years. Because anything beyond that to me is kind of meaningless. We can have that dialogue separately if you want, but I think we need to look after the next 5 years, and that's our obligation for the province anyway.
Councillor Shalat.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. The additional 5 years, so this is looking at 2024 to 2029. The reworded motion is just talking about this 5-year financial plan, so only going to 2025.
Or no, 2027.
27. Wow, yeah. 27. Okay. I poured myself out on a spreadsheet. And this 5-year financial plan, I do feel more comfortable with, because, yeah, this is going to be a heavy conversation for the next council to discuss with that master transportation plan and an updated OCP and looking at DCCs and trying to look at this conversation about how do we fund our paving program? What does our paving program look like? Maybe we're investing more in multi-use paths rather than car infrastructure. But yeah, maybe it will go more than that. To me, what I see here is putting it in the budget line that this needs to be funded. Whether it's used for car infrastructure or used for multimodal, that's fine. Make a plan later and it's probably going to cost more. I doubt it's going to cost less.
Yeah.
To me, this is being smart about making sure there is a budget line that we are consistently funding so that when the time comes, we're not starting from scratch. Because if we wait till we have all the information in front of us, it's going to be too late to get started.
All right, appreciate the comment. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Elliott is opposed. Balance of council approves. This is approved. Thank you. Moving on to number 4. Someone want to make this motion and then we can fill in the blanks here.
Motion will need the blanks filled in.
Okay, so let's talk about the blanks here first and then we can
Sarah.
go forward. So, Ms. McKay, comment.
Thanks, Your Worship. So at the last budget meeting, council requested some scenarios be brought forward. So for the water, it was 5% and 10% increases. And so that's what's in the scenario document that's in front of you. And it shows you where we will end up, where there's some shortfalls in reserves. If there's a shortfall in a reserve, then it means that we need to reduce capital projects in that year or potentially find alternate sources of funding for them. And so there's, so it's 5% and 10%. And then I did do one extra scenario where I showed you if we wanted to make what I believe council views as a reasonable increase in future years rather than 10% forever and 5% forever. If we wanted to keep it at, say, 3% in subsequent years, then we would need to have about a 50% increase in the first year, and then we could go back to inflationary increases going forward.
Okay. Comments from council? Council Palmer.
So just a question. I didn't see the scenario, so somehow I missed that.
It's further down in the draft report. So 5% scenario, 25% for 2022, $2.08 per month. 2023, $26 scenario, $2.17 per month. 10%, $49, $4.08 per month. 23.54.
It's on the last page 4 of the report.
Did you get this was just here this weekend though, for the water scenarios. You picked up since Friday.
Are you looking for the annual increases or for this one?
Those are the scenarios. It's got a couple of my noodles.
Okay, so that's what.
That was the package.
Thank you.
Your Worship,
Go ahead, please.
So there's the water utility and the sewer utility. The sewer utility is where we have the long-term waste management. We have a long-term plan. We have the funding in place. We've got a good project going there. I look forward to that conversation. The water plan is still coming. Is that correct? The full details is in progress?
Yes, Ms. McKay's nodding her head, yes.
Yeah. And again, to what I was saying at the beginning of the meeting is I'm really looking for what is ours to deal with and what should be queued up for the next council to dig into and deal with. That they might have different tools or different knowledge once that full report comes out. With adjusting this utility fees to properly cover the administration costs of running the utilities. I think that's a big shift for our council to make. And I think that's an important one because it does clarify the conversation around our utilities going forward. To have this many big jumps in 1 year, I struggle with the value in that, in the long-term conversation with the community. Yes, is it probably a good idea? Is it probably needed? Is it probably a smart move? Arguable, probably. But if it challenges our conversation with the community because it's one more thing on top of a lot of other things, I think it might be worth holding off on.
Okay.
So looking at the funding and the spreadsheets and where it starts going into debt, I think the water utility, I think this year going at a 5%, but making sure that this is part of the conversation going into next year's budget and with the next council to look at how are we going to fund water? How are we going to make this utility work? Because a 5% increase now is a little bit, but we need to do more.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any other comments from council? I don't disagree at this. We have lots of things that we're needing to deal with, and I had said to staff, we want to know the facts, and then we as council need to make sure that it's palatable for our community members so that they feel that they can afford this. We're still dealing with COVID, and there's lots of concerns over finances with that, especially for those that are marginalized financially. So, I don't disagree. Any other comments from councilors on 5% or 10%, or how do you feel? Councilor Eller?
I guess one of the scenarios was a bigger lump sum contribution at the start and then 5-10% down the road. To me, simplicity is great I would suggest just let's put it in place, a set rate for the next 5 years. It's an increase in our reserve. The bigger decisions, we've done well. We've built our reserve over the last number of years. We're adding more and more to it. We continue to do it for this term, but eventually we're going to have to bite the bullet and take a big plunge. But that's not our decision. We've got 8 months left or 7 months left. I think we've done a good job getting to this point. Let's narrow the scope just to 5 years, and then the next council term they can come in. I would suggest 10% sewer, water. I know that's it at that for this term.
10% for each one, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just build a reserve and make it simple for the next 5 years. And then if they want to extend it next term, then that's their choice.
Any comments from other council? Councilor Ryan and Councilor Brooksville.
I feel like that's like how we got here is no council wants to be the one to do the big increase. But I do hear fellow councilors' comments. I would personally be in favor of the 10% increase.
For each one, or for just water?
Just for water. Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Brooksville.
So yeah, to some degree with the water, there's the large replacement of the main pipe coming from Greeley that we know is coming, and I'm guessing is being budgeted. What year would that be? For 2031? Is that correct? Is that the big project that we're seeing there?
Through your worship, those are multi-year projects. It's about a $20+ million project all together. And so we would like to, we know we've got some sections of pipe that are undersized now that minimize the amount of gravity flow that we can get from Greeley to fill some of our reservoirs. And so those pieces of pipes, they are old and they do need to be increased in size in order that gravity supports our system. If we don't replace them, and over time these things do get corroded and get gungy inside, if I might say. In the worst case scenario, we end up having to pump from Greeley down here, which just adds more cost to the system. And so in a perfect world, we always like to use gravity for these sorts of systems because it's way cheaper and we don't have to worry about anything failing.
So yeah, in short, the water reserve fund is in dire straits as the sewer reserve fund. And given that I think we're going to be talking about a larger increase to the sewer fund, I'd be more in favor of either 5 or 10% this year for the water fund. But that's where I was thinking, because then we also have to say what we're projecting outwards as well. I was gonna suggest 10% for this year, 5% thereafter, and then once we have a better idea in terms of the coming costs, the next council can make those decisions. But
Okay, so any other comments?
Just, sorry.
Go ahead, no?
On the conversation we had, I think the projections that we were given had for 15 years out, and said it was 10%, 5% for the next 15 years. So giving that to the public would create a storm, I would think. So again, that was my say, just narrow the focus to a 5-year projection. And let's say that we need to do this regardless. One, we're gonna have to stomach this. But a simple message, this is what we're gonna do, and we're bumping up the utility fees, water and sewer for the next 5 years. And whatever the next council decides, that's their choice, but we've done our bit. And I think that's a positive message to the public, that we're responsible. And the fact we bumped it up all the way along.
Councillor Gillette, you have a comment?
Just a cautionary comment on that is, I think one lesson that I took out of the pandemic is that people appreciate honesty. If you tell me 2 more weeks to bend the curve, and then 2 years later, here we are. Like, if we know this is a big project, that this is what it's gonna take to pay for it, I would rather be honest with the community and figure out how we word it so it's clear. Because I don't think we'd be doing anybody any favors by hiding the fact that there are some big bills coming up, right? And they need to be looked at. A 5% or even a 10% increase now is not going to solve that challenge. It will be a conversation that we need to have, and the next council needs to buy into this so that they don't reduce that amount in future years. So I'm cautionary that it's, again, this is where I'm really keen on having very clear ways of talking about how we talk about this money.
Okay, so Councillor Palmer, you had your hand up?
No, it's okay.
Okay, Councillor.
I agree, we have to face this, as the music's, we have to listen to it. But you don't, again, take it out of context. We just got 2 years of a COVID crisis. We're now into a World War III possibility. We have, inflation going through the roof. We have a railway strike. The world is, out there in a bit of a turmoil right now. And adding significant scare to, a crashed water system and a sewer plant that's going to explode is not a messy. It doesn't build confidence. It just says you want someone with steady hand. Just say, okay, we'll deal with this in a confident, mature manner, right? And I say that's the message we need to send out. And we're not washing it, brushing it aside. We're aware.
All right, so we're at a point where we need to go into a council meeting shortly. So my question is, do you want to deal with this motion on the table? Long-term financial plan reflects an annual water rate increase of 1%, and that staff prepare a bylaw to amend the fees and charges to increase water rates by that percentage for 2022. Councillor Palmer.
So looking at the time, I don't think there isn't a motion on the table right now, so I think we should
defer that to the next meeting.
Next.
Or bring
another time.
Yep, okay. Councillor Gillette.
Okay, I guess this would be a long night to come back to it, I guess, later
Yeah.
that's unnecessary.
tonight.
If we finish everything by 4, I'm sure.
Okay.
So I'll put a motion to terminate the meeting.
All right. Second. All those in favor? This meeting is terminated. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Appreciate that. We're going to be a few minutes here before